Hi everybody, Gisele Grenier here from artplace.ca. In today's video, what we're going to be doing is creating miniature art. And I have a little piece of watercolor paper here. It's a 140-pound watercolor paper. It's raw. It hasn't been primed. So we're going to work with that. We're going to work with some decoupage paper. You can use anything you want. Okay, you can use anything you want. And I've got some stencils out. I'm going to go through all the supplies as we go, plus it will be included in the instruction sheet. So as I start using the products, I'll explain them. So the first thing what we're going to do is prime our paper. And this is important because you don't want the paint just to be sucked into the paper. You want a little bit of that barrier layer. What I'm also going to do is get a really good close-up so you can see everything that's happening. So I'm going to get that's not gesso, this is gesso. So I'm using the DecoArt Media Gesso, and I'm going to take a dry brush, and I'm just going to apply a layer of this. It's double-sided, so I don't care if the gesso gets on both sides, and you do want to prime both sides of the watercolor paper. And when I'm priming these, I mean, this is a boring step, it really is. I do these in batches. So I will do a whole bunch at the same time. And depending on, I have different little stacks of papers. And sometimes if I know I'm going to create something with a very thin layer of gesso, I'll take the full sheet, prime the whole thing at once, front and then back, and then I'll cut it. I mean, this doesn't take long as you're doing it dry. And then you can hit this with your heat gun, but if you're doing them in batches, it doesn't take much just to let it sit and dry. Let that dry, then flip it over and do the other side. And to save time, I have one that I prepared. Let me just clean the table here. Let me just clean the table. Okay, so that's prepared front and back. And we're going to add some color. We're going to do we could do a little bit of finger painting if you wanted to. Use your finger for this part. So I'm using the DecoArt Media Fluid Acrylic Cobalt Teal. And it's a fluid acrylic, which is transparent. And if you could really use any colors you want for this type of thing. This color isn't really going to show through. So you don't need to worry yourself, about what to use or what not to use. So I'm going to get my number 10 shader, and I'm just going to apply a little bit of color. I'm not going for perfection because this is all going to be covered up. I'm just getting a little bit of color on there. That's it. That's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. Now I am going to hit this with the heat gun. So just for a little bit. That's it. Okay. Now we're going to collage some paper. So for the paper, I'm using the Arrows paper. Like I said, you can use anything you want. Strips of pieces out of a magazine, that's fine. These kitchen cloths are not absorbing. Now this is an actual formal lesson, so I am going to be explaining a lot of details with this. Ideally what we want to do is create some texture, visual texture and physical texture. So just take, and we're going to be putting our inspirational quote here. You can put whatever you want. We'll put that right here. So I'm thinking this might be nice right here. So I'll just do a little bit piece, tear that. You can see how flexible this is. You can really use anything you want. And then, so I'm kind of liking that. Oh, but I want the arrow to go up, not down. And you'll see why I want the arrow up when it comes to doing the quote. But I should just get my whole sheet of paper. I don't have to do any strips. Okay, so I'm thinking that. All right. Or I could do this. Here, how about that? That's a little bit better. I get some good coverage there. And the paper's translucent, you can still see a little bit through it. Oh my goodness. So I'm going to get some now the decoupage medium I'm using is specifically made for paper. And I'm going to apply this on everything. Using my brush dry, because it's going to go in water right after that. And the brushes I'm using are the Aqualon brushes from Royal Brush. They're acrylic handles, so this won't crack. I don't let my brushes sit in water very long, but while I'm teaching a formal lesson, I don't want to be stopping 50 million times to clean my brushes. Just going to go off the side a little bit. Press that down. And I'm going to wrap the whole thing around. And then these brushes are angled, so you can also use that for pressing. Put a little bit more medium here. And this creates what's called a barrier layer as well. So you can do a little bit more work on the card, on the watercolor stock. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is wrap that over. I'm going to put another little piece right here. This is just to create a little bit of texture in the back. You don't have to. Now I'm using an unstick, no stick mat here, so I'm not worried about this stuff drying. But this decoupage medium from DecoArt, okay, I do have to tell you, it is very, very strong. So if you get some on your fingers, make sure you wash your hands. It's not toxic, but it sticks. It sticks. And this also makes your card a little bit more sturdier. So if you're using 90-pound watercolor paper, then it'll help. I think I'll just stick with this one here. Then I'll wrap this over, sealing every single time. Fold that. Like I said, doing miniature art like this, the whole goal is to get it done. You don't have to have it perfect, which is why I like wrapping the stuff around, because then it really does look handmade. And on top of that, you can always finish the card after the fact. Now this one here is way too tiny to fold over, so I am going to cut that down. So I have that like that, and then I'm going to put another layer here. And you can dry these on crumpled wax paper. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to stand that up, and just right now, and you can actually just do that, just stand it up against a bottle. But I'm going to show you one way if you want to batch these up, because doing cards, little tags, little miniature art minis, whatever you want to call them, doing them in batches is the way to do it. So you prime everything, and so I'm going to grab some wax paper, and then I'm going to take, and I'm going to crumple them up into little balls. And the wax paper, this is garbage. This is stuff that I've used this so many times, and it's perfect for this. This is the stuff I put in between journal pages. So you can put 4 little pieces like that, then take your card and just lay it right on top. Easy peasy. And you're only the points are touching the card, so it'll be able to dry just fine. Now this is already starting to dry. You can see it here. If you want to hit this with a heat gun, I would do that very carefully, because you don't want to have it just where it's dry to the top and not inside, because even though something may be dry to touch, especially when you're doing a lot of collage material, you need to let the layers dry. It takes about 15 minutes for this to be totally dry. So we use a really thin layer, and I can already see it starting to dry. I can use a heat gun on this, whoops, to speed up the drying time. I'm not going to. I'm going to let it dry naturally, and then when we come back, we'll go on and add a little bit more color. Okay, so it's dry now, not tacky. So we're going to do a little bit of painting here, and I've got some translucent white and some yellow-green light. Now the yellow-green light is a semi-transparent, and the translucent white is also semi-transparent. And what the whole goal is we want to mute this paper. We want to kind of push it to the back. If you don't have any type of a translucent or semi-transparent white, take a little bit of gesso or take a little bit of titanium white, add water, and you may have to do some test strips until you get the right consistency. So I'm going to take a little bit of this white, and I'm just going to apply a little bit here. And you can also use your fingers, and I'll do the green with my fingers. And you just want to push this back a little bit, making sure that everything is still showing through. You don't have to cover everything. And I'm going to work the white on a little bit of the green. And there's no paper here, so the color will go on a little bit differently. And then for the green, if I just take my finger, just a little bit on my finger, come in here. Actually, let me dry this first. Oops. Oh, goodness. Wait for that to cool down. Anytime you're using your heat gun, make sure you let your paper cool down first. And now I can get some of that paint right in those ridges. It creates a really nice rough texture. Now, that may look really bright. Well, watch what I'm going to do after. So I'm going to put a little bit more green using my brush. And I'm going to layer a little bit more white on the top of that. You just want to add a speck of color, not too much. Looks like a lot of color, right? Let me clean this up. And these kitchen cloths don't seem to be absorbing very well. Get a fresh baby wipe. If you don't have baby wipes, you can use just a damp cloth. This is way too wet. I'm going to put it into some paper towel. And these paper towels are the Viva paper towels, so they're really absorbent. And I would still keep the paper towel. And the drying time is probably about 10 Mississippis. I'm going to take the baby wipe and start wiping some of that back. When it gets wet, you can take some of the paint off. Just removing the excess. Okay. Now I'm going to show you how to do it with the gesso. So I'm going to dry this because not everybody has translucent white. So I'm going to show you how to do this with the gesso. Clean my brush. A little bit of gesso. And the brush is damp. You can see that it's a little bit watery now. This gesso is nice and thick, so you can see it's a little bit. You can add a little bit more water to that. So you make it a little bit more fluid. Now watch. See? You can still see through it. You can still see the paper through it. So just by adding a little bit of water, and traditionally gesso you would thin it down depending on what you're applying. Gesso is, if you think of it like a primer, but because it's got some nice tooth, it holds paint really, really well. When I was learning how to, I was going through my fine art schooling, and I was watching Jerry Yarnell on TV. He's a famous TV artist. He uses gesso instead of titanium white because it's got really good tooth to it, and it's matte. See? I'm going to just push a little bit of that green, oops, you can't see, a little bit of that green back. And I'm going to mute this side a little bit more because the quote's going to be here. I'm really going to push this back. Let some of that blue show through. I'm going to dry this now. As long as my hand can hold the card, the heat is fine. Let that come to room temperature. I'm putting my hand on it to cool it down. You do not want to be painting on a hot painting. I want to mute this a little bit more. There we go. So that's how to do it with the gesso. And gesso goes so far. It goes so far. And you can get gesso virtually anywhere, any place that sells paint. And there are different brands out there. I'm a DecoArt helping artist, so I use the DecoArt products. But there's a lot of different brands out there. And before choosing your brand is to do some research on it first. I remember buying some, I won't name the brand, but it was a local art store. It was under their brand, and it was probably the worst gesso I had. It was just, it's as if it was like 10 parts water, 1 part gesso. It was horrible, and it was absolute waste of money, and they wouldn't take it back. There we go. Now I'm going to cut this little piece of paper hanging off there. And I want to, let's brown this up a bit. Brown this up? What does that mean, brown this up? Get the paint out of the way. So again, I'm using the DecoArt Media Fluids. And I'm going now with the transparent red iron oxide and transparent yellow iron oxide. And what is this woman doing? Okay. Let's see. I want to make a brown, but these are transparent. And oh, that's actually mixes not too bad. It's more orangey. And I don't know why I used my brush for that. This I'm going to use my finger. And all I want to do, roughly apply a little bit of this around the piece. You're going to see how this is going to pop once we put our barrier layer on there. That's it. Hang on, let me just put a bit more in that corner. There we go. Let some of that white show through. Like that. And, well, typically I would use this paint in something else right away. It's a formal lesson. I don't want to waste your time. I'm going to quickly dry this. And let's do some stenciling. Let's do the flower first. And I'm going to, this is the DecoArt these are the DecoArt Mixed Media Stencils. Is this the Mixed Media one? Yeah, they're both the Mixed Media Stencils. Daisy Chain and Inspiration. And we're going to be using Dream as our sentiment. And we're going to use this one for some little bit of accent. I'm going to be using translucent white. And I'm going to pop some of the flower, just a few little pieces, a little bit off the card. So this is just now, so what we worked on before this is the background. Now we're working the middle ground. And I'll put, let's put another one here. And we'll do one more. Let's see, we got one here, one here, one here, one here, one here. Let's connect these. Perfect. And to wipe the stencil, I'm just going to take my baby wipe, very carefully do this. I hate cleaning stencils. Absolutely hate it. I used to, before Harrison went into the army, when he was staying with us, I would have a container of water and I would just throw the stencils in there so I can clean them at the end. Now that Chaos is here, Harrison's in Nunavut right now. I can't put the water because she is obsessed with drinking paint water, so we can't do any of that. I'm gonna take a little bit of this paint and I'm just gonna hit that right in here, and you'll know why in a sec. Going right about in the middle. There we go. That little accent there. Oh, I hate wasting paint. If you're gonna do art, regardless of the art you create, try to batch them up so you don't waste any paint. Let me just quickly dry this. Bring that down. Okay, so let's stencil. We're going to use raw umber, or burnt umber I should say, for this. Yeah, I'm going to use burnt umber. I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to use burnt umber or raw umber. Raw umber is going to be used for the edge. And I have to get a another little stencil brush. And the stencils is translucent, so you can actually see for placement. But again, you don't have to be perfect. You're going to load the brush really well and blot the excess off. And I'm just going to pounce up and down. The stencil, I actually damaged the stencil, the R. I have to be very careful. I'm very, very rough on my art products. I should respect them a little bit better. If you have stick-on letters, you can use that as well. If you would prefer using a stamp, you can do that as well. You can use any sentiment you want. And you can see how so easy it is to adapt this to any size. You can adapt that to any size. This one comes clean very easily as long as I don't press too hard. I kinked the A. All right. I want to try that. We're going to be putting our barrier layer on now. A barrier layer basically creates a translucent layer, and it not only protects the layer below it, it almost acts a bit like a sealer. And I'm going to be using matte medium for this. And I'm going to get a bigger brush, number 8 brush. It's important that this be dry. And one of the reasons for doing this is that when we edge we're going to be edging the paper. So if we make a mistake, we can wipe everything off. I don't want to make sure that none of this gets altered. And by batching these up, I would also finish the back end as well. I would paint the back end and stuff like that. So just a little layer. As well, when you're creating a barrier layer, the more transparent layers you have in your art, the light's going to shine through all those layers, and it's going to it's going to be very rich in color. Let me quickly dry that. This you can let air dry. And I want to finish the edge first before we do anything else. So I'm going to take some raw umber. No, I lied. Let me take my stamp. Any butterfly stamp. And this is just the butterfly from the Ranger stamp. Any stamp. Doesn't matter what it is. And I'm using archival ink. I'm using Stays On. Now, I love the smell of this stuff, but you're not supposed to inhale it. It's a solvent ink. But I love the smell of this. And I'm going to ink that really, really well. And, oh shoot. Darn. Oh, let me just use the paper that was in here. We only need half. We only need half. So I'm going to, right there, make sure that's really well stamped. There we go. So take the baby wipe, just quickly give the stamp a clean. I love butterflies, absolutely obsessed with butterflies. Butterflies, owls, moths, love them. We don't need this anymore. And now I want to finish the edge. Now I can take a little stencil brush for the edge. You can also just, we could also use the stamp pad as well, but it's easier just using this. So a little bit of raw, that's not raw umber. Raw umber is a very dull brown. And all I'm going to do is just hit the side like that. The other way you can do it, take a little cosmetic sponge, dip. This is much easier. Do the edge first. And I'm pressing quite hard. That way when it bends like that, and I get some in the front, which is what I want. And basically do this as far as you want. And the barrier layer will also, the barrier layer we put on will help that if you put too much paint on, it'll be easier to clean up because it creates that extra layer of protection. There we go. And there goes that paint again. I'm wasting all that paint. I'm going to get a journal and start dumping the stuff in there. Now this, we need this to dry. What we're going to be doing now, we're going to be putting our liquid glass on top. So what I've got, this is the final stage. You can leave the card the way it is. I want to make mine very glassy looking. So I'm using liquid glass. Now I've got 2 containers of liquid glass, and in the one part I attached a fitting, which is a ultra fine writer, and it's self-cleaning. It's got a pin on it, and it goes inside right here to unblock it. Okay, and all you do is you take this off and you just put this on. And I'm going to get this started. And this is very hard on the hands. And I'm going to use 2 hands. Hopefully it won't get in the way. And what I'm doing is I'm creating the outside border, and I'm going to show you why I use this first. See how tiny that is? The actual liquid glass one, mine may not be too bad now because it's not hot outside. It's actually kind of cold. When I use this, depending on how hot it is, sometimes it actually spreads out. Actually, this isn't too bad. That one's not too bad. We're going to fill in the whole thing. We're going to do the whole thing. Actually, I'm going to do the rest with the other one. When it was 40 degrees outside, this stuff just spread right out. And basically this is the frame to hold all the glass. Now what I have done as well, I like using triple thick, and there is a liquid form for that, and that takes a long time to dry. It also comes in a spray form. You have to do it outside though. Now for the rest of this, you're just going to fill that in as close as you can. And you're going to do the whole thing. And I can use a brush, and then I can just use the tip of my brush to level things out. And this will dry completely transparent. Actually, it's better if I use this. There we go. Get in there. It's so fine. See, it's starting to level out. So you want to try to do this right next to it. I do have to admit this is a bit hard on the hands, or for me anyways. I'm having to squeeze really, really hard. What I'm probably going to do is dump the medium into another bottle because this is really hard on the hands. Come on. And I'm doing this in real time so you can see how it levels out a little bit. Oops, I touched that there. Come on. Yeah, this is really hard on the hands. You really shouldn't, well, you probably could apply this with a brush, but it's for this particular technique, you don't want brush strokes to show through. And I've got this just above the cardstock. That way the bottle isn't dragging anything through. So watch how that levels out. Oops, I missed one, so we'll see how that goes back together. Oh, that was painful. Just encourage that. And that's how it's going to dry. I would let this sit for a day to dry. And I'm going to show you how I lift that up. So I have a piece of masonite with wax paper on it. And what I'm going to do, actually let me zoom out the camera. I'm going to put that right there. And you can take a credit card or a piece of plastic, and you just want to get it right on it. Oh, I got my hands on there. Actually, I should have did the liquid glass while it was on this piece. That was my mistake. I'm just going to put a little bit more there. Here we go. Let's see how it levels out quite nicely. So I'll let this dry for a day, and then when we come back, I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished. Okay, it's been about 24 hours for drying time, and look at this. Isn't that gorgeous? See how it, oh, excuse the gesso. Look how beautiful that dried. And just, you know, if you take a look at the butterfly, look at the little textures there. Isn't that gorgeous? Oh, look how beautiful that looks. Now I created another one. I already did this ahead of time because I wanted to see how thick I could put this on. Here's the other one. So this is the first one I created, and see how thick that is? Okay, the layer is very, very thin. Now look at this one. I don't know if you can tell. Much thicker. This feels, you know, with those stickers that you can get that are the squishy stickers, they have that clear top on it. I think they're called epoxy stickers. That's what this feels like. I love this. So there you go. Let's get out of that glare. Two designs that are very, very similar. You can tell they're similar. They're in a series. But just by using the torn paper, just by tearing it and randomly putting it down, don't pay too much attention about the actual tear. The stencil is different. They do look different, but they definitely look like they're in part of a series. So if you think of putting the card on the other side, if you did on a canvas, which I will be doing, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, I will be doing a 2-panel like this, where the butterfly will actually be over 2 pieces, so they'd be two different sentiments. But imagine it being like that. So I hope that you enjoyed this project, and I'm going to clean up my table, and I'm going to bring out the other sets of pieces for the other video I did, and I hope that you give this a try. Please share it with me, email me a picture, pop it into the comments below that you created. If you have any problems or questions, just let me know. All right, so until I see you next time, stay inspired.